I am the trustee for my nephew's trust fund, and my sister-in-law is demanding access to it for her stepdaughter's medical bills. 5 years ago, my brother lost his battle with cancer. In his final weeks, he set up a trust fund for his son James. James has always been focused on his education. My brother specifically made me the trustee instead of his wife Clara, and the terms are clear. The money can only be used for James's education or when he turns 25. In private, my brother made me promise to protect this inheritance. He was worried about Clara's spending habits. He held my hand in his hospital bed and said, "Don't let anyone touch that money except for James." It was one of the last coherent conversations we had before the pain meds really took over. After my brother passed, Clara eventually remarried Greg about 2 years ago. They created this blended family with his daughter Lily. I've noticed James spends more and more time at my place these days. He's been accepted to a prestigious university with a partial scholarship, but still needs significant funding, which is exactly what the trust was designed for. So everything was going according to plan until 2 nights ago when my phone rang at 2 a.m. It was Clara. Apparently, Lily had been in a serious accident during a school trip to Europe and needed emergency surgery. Their insurance wouldn't cover all the costs of treatment and transport back to the US. Clara told me they needed $50,000 immediately. I was confused, offering sympathies and asking how I could help when she wanted to borrow from James's trust fund. I tried to be gentle. I reminded her about the terms of the trust and that legally I couldn't just hand over the money for something unrelated to James's education. I explained that I'm bound by the legal document my brother created. That's when her tone changed. She said, "A child's life is at stake here. Do you really think my husband would want his money sitting in an account while a family member is in danger?" I pointed out that Lily, while part of Clara's new family, wasn't related to my brother and wasn't covered under the terms he established. I suggested she look into emergency loans or press the insurance company harder for emergency coverage. "You're being completely heartless," she said, using legal technicalities to avoid helping family. My husband was the most generous person I knew. He would be disgusted by this. Then she hung up on me. I sat there in my bedroom feeling like absolute garbage. Was I being heartless? Was I taking my trustee role too literally? I kept thinking about what my brother would want in this situation. The next morning, I called James, who was staying at a friend's house for the weekend. I wanted to give him a heads up about the situation, but turns out Clara had already called him directly asking for his permission to use the money. This bothered me since he's still a minor and she was putting him in a difficult position. James told me he had explicitly told his mom not to touch his inheritance. The partial scholarship to his dream university is contingent on him having enough for the first year's tuition, which is due in just 3 months. He's worked hard for years to get this opportunity. If the money disappears now, he loses everything he's worked for. I spent all day yesterday going back and forth on this. On one hand, I made a promise to my dying brother to protect this money for James's future. I'm legally bound as the trustee to follow the terms of the trust, and James needs this money for the opportunity that could shape his entire life. On the other hand, a young girl is in a medical emergency, and I feel like an absolute monster for saying no. I know my brother was generous, but he also specifically set up this trust with explicit restrictions. I also know that Clara and Greg have a history of financial troubles. Just to be clear, it's not like I don't care about Lily. I've only met her a handful of times at family gatherings, but she seems like a sweet kid. I feel terrible that she's hurt and in another country. But is it right to compromise James's future that my brother specifically planned for? The worst part is how Clara is making me out to be the villain here. She's telling me I'm letting a child suffer when I have the power to help. But it's not my money to give. It belongs to James for the specific purpose my brother intended. I keep thinking about my brother in the hospital. He trusted me with this responsibility. But now I'm questioning if I'm taking that responsibility too far. This morning I got a call from my aunt asking why I'm refusing to help family in need. I tried explaining the legal constraints, but she didn't want to hear it. Now I'm getting nasty looks from all sides of the family, like I'm hoarding money while a child suffers. I've been researching emergency medical evacuation options and international healthcare coverage all morning to try to find alternatives for them. I even looked into whether I could personally loan them some money. I honestly don't know what the right thing to do is anymore. Am I being too rigid about my brother's wishes? Or would I be betraying his final request if I gave in to Clara's demands? I know James needs this money for college, but it feels horrible to prioritize education over immediate medical care, even if that's what the trust was created for. I keep going back and forth on whether I'm being a good trustee or a heartless jerk. I've never felt more conflicted about anything in my life. Is there something I'm missing here that would make this situation clearer? Now for the first update. Update: Trust Fund Dilemma. Things have escalated with my Sael and her husband. Thank you everyone for your support and advice on my original post. I've been trying to respond to comments, but there are hundreds, so I'm posting this update with everything that's happened since. It's been 3 days since my original post, and my phone has been filled with messages from Clara, Greg, and even extended family members. Most of them were along the lines of what a terrible, heartless person I am for not helping with Lily's medical emergency. Apparently, Clara has been busy making phone calls to everyone we know. I checked in with James to see how he was doing. He told me that Clara and Greg had actually managed to secure emergency funds through a combination of credit cards and a loan from Greg's parents. Lily got the surgery she needed, thank goodness. But according to James, Clara has been telling everyone that Lily's condition got worse because I delayed things. I checked the timeline, and that's simply not true. They got the money within hours of our conversation. For those who suggested I consult with the attorney who set up the trust, great minds think alike. I called the family attorney who helped my brother establish the trust. He confirmed what many of you pointed out in the comments. Using the funds for anyone other than James would not only violate my brother's wishes, but would be a breach of my fiduciary duty and potentially illegal. I could actually face legal consequences for misusing the funds, even with good intentions. But here's something I didn't know until the attorney told me. Clara had previously attempted to challenge the trust shortly after remarrying Greg 2 years ago. She claimed she needed funds to provide a stable home for James. The case was dismissed because the trust terms were clear, but she never mentioned this to me. The attorney seemed surprised I didn't know about it. I guess my brother had better foresight than I realized when he made me trustee instead of her. To those asking if I tried to help find other solutions, yes, absolutely. I spent hours researching alternative funding options and was planning to suggest a few when things took an unexpected turn. 3 days after Clara's initial call, I was at home making dinner when my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Clara and Greg standing there, both looking agitated. Greg and Clara asked if they could come in to talk about things. I wasn't really prepared for a confrontation, but I let them in anyway. Once we were in my living room, Clara pulled out a folder of medical documents showing Lily's condition and about $47,000 in medical bills they've accumulated, plus another $15,000 for emergency medical transport back to the US. She spread them across my coffee table, one by one. Greg talked about how they'd had to max out 3 credit cards and take a loan at what he called a criminal interest rate because I wouldn't temporarily release what he kept calling family money. The way he emphasized temporarily made it clear he didn't believe they'd ever pay it back. I tried to repeat what I'd told Clara on the phone, that the trust is legally established for James's benefit only, and that I'm bound by its terms. Clara cut me off as she brought up her 3 miscarriages before having James and how my brother would be disgusted by this treatment of a child in need. I stayed calm but firm, thanks to those who advised me to stand my ground. I explained again that James's university tuition deposit is due soon, and that the partial scholarship he worked years for requires matching funds from his trust within 90 days. If the money isn't there, he loses the scholarship and possibly his spot at the university. That's when Greg stood up, pointed his finger at me, and claimed I was using James as an excuse. He suggested I've always resented Clara for replacing James's biological mother who died when he was a toddler. This is untrue. My brother was widowed for years before meeting Clara, and I've always tried to be good to her for James's sake. You're letting your personal feelings get in the way of helping a child, Greg said. Clara said Lily might need follow-up surgeries and asked if I would let a child suffer just to send another kid to an overpriced university. She said James could easily attend community college for 2 years instead. I was shocked she would suggest changing the education plan her own son has been working toward for years. I suggested that I could help them set up a crowdfunding campaign for Lily's medical expenses, which many commenters suggested, thinking this was a constructive alternative. Greg actually laughed at this and asked if I planned to contribute to it myself or if I was too busy counting James's money. The conversation deteriorated from there. They left after about 20 minutes of hostile comments. After they left, I noticed that a photo of James as a child had been knocked off my shelf. I'm not sure if it was accidental or intentional. I called James right after to check in, and he sounded stressed. He told me, "Clara has been telling family members that I've stolen money that rightfully belongs to the family and that I'm preventing a sick child from getting care." He said he's trying to stay out of it, but it's becoming impossible since Clara keeps bringing it up and asking him to talk sense into me. That night, I discovered Clara had posted on social media about how some people hoard wealth while children suffer. She didn't name me directly, but made obvious references that resulted in several mutual acquaintances messaging me asking what was going on. I haven't responded to any of these messages yet, not sure what to say without escalating things further. Edit. Forgot to mention that James told me Clara and Greg have been pressuring him to agree to share his portion of the money when he turns 18. They've apparently been telling him that as the man of the house, he should be contributing to family emergencies. James is really uncomfortable with this, but doesn't want to create more conflict while still living under their roof. I'm starting to worry about James being in that house with all this tension. He's spending more time at friends' houses lately, and I'm considering offering him my spare room until he leaves for university. I'm just not sure if that would make the situation better or worse at this point. I really don't know what to do next. Clara and Greg seem determined to get this money one way or another, and they're turning family members against me in the process. At the same time, I know my brother trusted me with this responsibility, and James is counting on these funds for his education. Thank you to everyone who offered advice on my last post. I never expected strangers on the internet to provide such thoughtful perspectives on such a difficult family situation. I'll update again if anything significant changes. Now for the second update. Update 2, Trust Fund Dilemma. My SIL and her husband are escalating things, and now the entire family is involved. Link to original post and first update for those who missed it. I want to thank everyone for the incredible support and advice. It's literally the only thing keeping me sane right now. It's been a week since Clara and Greg's surprise visit to my house, and things have somehow managed to get even worse. Didn't think that was possible, but here we are. I've been bombarded with messages from extended family members I barely speak to, all suddenly having strong opinions about what I should do with my nephew's trust fund. Some of these people haven't even bothered to call James on his birthday in years, but now they're family financial advisors, apparently. James called me yesterday. He told me Clara and Greg are now refusing to complete the financial aid forms for his university application. They're claiming they can't afford to help after Lily's medical bills, which is ridiculous because completing the forms doesn't cost anything. It's just paperwork. I suspect this is their new strategy to force the trust fund issue. The timing couldn't be worse. James turns 18 in just 2 months, after which he can legally make these decisions without parental consent. But the university requires the financial aid application to be completed before then. If he misses the deadline, he could lose his spot entirely, and the scholarship he worked so hard for. While trying to figure out what to do about this, I got a call from my friend Sarah, who runs in the same social circles as Clara. She mentioned that before Lily's accident, Clara and Greg had been planning a home renovation. They'd already put down non-refundable deposits with contractors and had been showing everyone design boards. So they have money for renovations, but are hounding a 17-year-old for his education fund? Unbelievable. When I updated James about this, he got quiet for a moment before sharing something. He told me he'd overheard Greg and Clara talking late one night when they thought he was asleep. Greg had suggested they could force access to the trust by having James live with them and making his life difficult until he agrees to share the money. James said Greg didn't realize he was in the hallway when he said this. I'm seriously worried about James being in that house now. Yesterday was my Aunt Ellen's birthday dinner, an event scheduled months ago that I couldn't easily skip without causing drama. I knew Clara and Greg would be there, but I figured we could all be civil for one evening in a public setting. Ha, wishful thinking. The moment I walked in, everyone stopped talking. 3 separate conversations just died mid-sentence. During dinner, Clara kept making these pointed comments about family loyalty and what my late husband would have wanted. She never addressed me directly, but everyone at the table knew exactly what she was talking about. I just kept my head down and focused on my plate. Then, my Aunt Ellen, who I thought was neutral in all this, brought up Lily's condition. "The poor girl is suffering because of financial constraints," she said. I later found out Clara had told her I was hoarding hundreds of thousands of dollars while Lily suffered. The trust isn't even that large. I tried changing the subject, asking my cousin about his new job, when Greg interrupted with his big announcement. They're setting up a fundraiser for Lily's medical care, since certain people who control family money have refused to help. That's when I finally addressed the situation directly. I calmly explained the legal constraints of the trust and James's upcoming education needs. I barely got 3 sentences out before Clara cut in with, "There you go again, putting paperwork above a child's life." The conversation took an even uglier turn when Greg suggested that my brother wasn't in his right mind when setting up the trust due to his medication. He actually had the nerve to imply the arrangement shouldn't be valid because my brother was too drugged up to know what he was doing. That was my breaking point. My brother spent his final weeks meticulously planning for his son's future while in excruciating pain. I stood up and told Greg that my brother was completely lucid and specifically established the trust because he was concerned about Clara's financial decisions. Maybe not my most diplomatic moment, but I couldn't sit there while he defamed my brother's memory. Clara immediately claimed I've always hated her and was punishing an innocent child because of it. Within seconds, 3 family members were comforting her while staring at me. I felt upset. Does no one remember how my brother stressed about Clara's spending for years before he died? As I was gathering my things to leave dinner, my Uncle Phil, my dad's older brother, pulled me aside. He's always been quiet, so I was surprised when he whispered that Clara had approached him for a loan before even asking about James's trust. He declined after learning they had recently purchased a luxury SUV. This was news to me. They bought a new car while claiming they have medical debt. On the drive home, I got a text from James saying Clara had called him in tears about how I had humiliated her at the family gathering. He feels caught in the middle of everything, which is exactly what I've been trying to avoid. The kid has enough stress with college applications and finishing high school. I hate that he's being dragged into this adult drama. After a sleepless night, weighing all my options, and reading through many of your comments on my last post, I made what might be a controversial decision. I contacted the university's financial aid office directly to explain James's unusual circumstances. I know this might be overstepping boundaries, but I feel responsible for protecting his future, and this situation has gone beyond ridiculous. Edit. A lot of you asked about what happened with James's scholarship requirements in my previous post. To clarify, the scholarship requires proof of matching funds from the trust within 90 days of acceptance. James can't access the trust himself until he's 25, except for education expenses that I approve as trustee, so he needs both the financial aid forms and the trust fund to make this work. The school initially told me they absolutely needed parental information for the FAFSA forms, but I'm hoping they might make an exception given the circumstances. I'm trying not to let this family drama impact James more than it already has, but it's getting increasingly difficult when Clara and Greg are actively trying to sabotage his education plans. I've offered to let James stay with me until he leaves for university, but he's worried that moving out would just confirm Clara's narrative that I'm turning him against her. I never thought a trust fund meant to secure my nephew's future would tear our family apart. I'll update again if anything significant changes, especially after I hear back from the university's financial aid office. Now for the final update. Final update. Trust fund dilemma resolved. From family disaster to unexpected resolution. Link to original post and previous updates. First, thank you to everyone who's followed this saga and offered advice. Your support kept me going through what's been the most stressful month of my life since my brother passed. It's been 2 weeks since that disaster at my Aunt Ellen's birthday dinner, and a lot has happened. After contacting the university's financial aid office about James's situation, I was pretty much expecting rejection. But sometimes they actually made an exception. To everyone who suggested I go directly to the financial aid office, you were absolutely right. They're allowing James to submit his application with my assistance instead of requiring Clara and Greg's information. The financial aid officer I spoke with said they deal with complicated family situations more often than people realize, and James's academic record made it easier for them to accommodate. Meanwhile, Lily returned home from Europe last week and is recovering well from her surgery. Clara and Greg's crowdfunding campaign has been surprisingly successful, raising almost $20,000 toward their medical expenses. I even contributed anonymously because regardless of the drama, Lily deserves proper care. My Uncle Phil told me several extended family members donated generously too, which makes Clara's continued narrative about me even more frustrating. A quick note: many commenters pointed out that Clara was likely exaggerating the medical costs to gain sympathy, and you were partially right. While Lily's emergency surgery was legitimate and expensive, I later discovered their insurance actually covered about 60% of the overseas costs after initial denial, something Clara conveniently never mentioned when demanding trust fund money. Despite the fundraiser's success, Clara has doubled down on telling everyone I refuse to help family in need while controlling money that should benefit the whole family. The story has evolved with each retelling, with some distant relatives now under the impression I'm sitting on millions. James texted me screenshots of social media posts where Clara vaguely references certain people who value money over family. What's worse, James revealed during our weekly dinner that Clara and Greg have been making comments about how he owes them after everything they've sacrificed. They've started suggesting that when he turns 18, he should agree to share his inheritance with the family, because that's what your father would have wanted. James is stressed enough about college preparations without this added pressure, and I can see it's wearing on him. Then came the breaking point. Last Thursday, I received a certified letter from some attorney representing Clara and Greg. The letter claimed the trust was established under undue influence, while my brother was medically compromised and threatened legal action if I didn't agree to renegotiate the terms. The attorney demanded copies of all trust documents and medical records from when my brother established it, clearly fishing for anything they could use. After consulting with the trust attorney, I decided it was time for a different approach. I texted Clara asking to meet one-on-one, suggesting a coffee shop near her work. No lawyers, no Greg, no audience for dramatics, just us talking like adults. Surprisingly, she agreed. I arrived early and secured a quiet table in the corner. Clara showed up 20 minutes late, looking stressed, and immediately launching into how the lawyer wasn't her idea, but Greg insisted they stand up for what's right, after I had humiliated them in front of the family. Without saying much, I placed a folder on the table containing several documents: the original trust paperwork with my brother's notarized signature, a medical certification of his competency from his oncologist at the time of signing, and financial statements showing the trust's actual value alongside the projected costs for James's complete undergraduate education. I'd also brought the handwritten letter my brother had left for James, explaining his decisions and hopes for his son's future. The change in Clara's expression as she reviewed these documents was remarkable. Her defensiveness faltered, especially when reading my brother's letter to James. She kept touching the paper where his handwriting was, and I realized that despite everything, she still misses him too. I then showed her an email from James's former therapist confirming that James had expressed anxiety about the pressure regarding his inheritance and feeling like just a source of money to his mother and Greg. That really seemed to hit home. Clara's composure cracked completely. In what felt like the first honest conversation we've had in years, she admitted that Greg has been the driving force behind the legal threats. Their financial situation is apparently much worse than anyone knows. They're actually facing potential foreclosure. The home renovation deposits were non-refundable. The medical bills piled up, and now they're drowning in debt with creditors calling daily. "What about the new SUV?" I asked, remembering what Uncle Phil had mentioned. She looked away, clearly embarrassed. "Greg insisted we maintain appearances," she said quietly. "He said, people wouldn't respect us if they knew how bad things were." After about an hour of surprisingly civil conversation, I offered a compromise. I wouldn't pursue legal action for their harassment and threats if they immediately stopped all attempts to access James's trust and signed a document acknowledging the trust's validity. Additionally, I agreed to personally loan Clara, not Greg, $5,000 to help with Lily's remaining expenses, with the strict condition that she seek financial counseling first and create a repayment plan. "I'm doing this for James," I told her. "He's caught in the middle of adult problems, and that needs to stop now." We parted with an awkward but genuine hug. She mumbled what sounded like an apology, though I couldn't catch all of it. The aftermath has been encouraging. Clara signed the acknowledgement document the next day, and James reports that the pressure about his inheritance has completely stopped. He's focusing on his college applications again and seems happier than I've seen him in months. Clara has even started sending me updates about Lily's recovery without any mention of money. Greg, meanwhile, is apparently furious about the agreement, but can't do much since Clara has refused to pursue legal action. According to James, they've been having some serious arguments about finances lately, with Clara finally standing up to him about their spending habits. Yesterday, James came over with news that made everything worth it. He got early acceptance to his first-choice university with the financial aid package we'd hoped for. We celebrated with pizza and ice cream like we used to do when he was younger. The look of relief on his face meant everything. Edit. Several people asked what happens next with Clara and Greg's financial situation. I connected Clara with a financial counselor who specializes in medical debt. She's already had 2 sessions and is working on a structured repayment plan. I've also helped James set up a separate bank account for his personal expenses that neither Clara nor Greg can access. The trust remains fully intact for his education, as my brother intended. Looking back at this whole mess, I realize how easily family conflicts can spiral when money gets involved. But I'm proud I stood firm on what my brother wanted for his son, even when it would have been easier to give in. Sometimes keeping a promise to someone who's gone is the most important thing you can do, even when it makes you, temporarily, the family villain. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't with enemies, but with the people who should be on your side. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with Clara, but for now, I'm just grateful James can focus on his future instead of family drama.